He is the Spurs beat writer for KENS5 out of San Antonio, and he is the host of the Locked on Spurs podcast. We welcome Jeff Garcia onto Hoopsology. Welcome, Jeff.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. Also, you want to add on in there as well, not able to know time zones. So we want to throw that in as well. You know?
Oh, no worries. All good.
I struggle with it too.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. But I'm just appreciative you guys are having me on. And yeah, I love to talk some Spurs.
Absolutely. And the Spurs, I mean, we mostly covered most of the teams in the NBA since our podcast has been around, but we have not gone to the Spurs, and great timing with Victor Wembanyama. So I just want to kind of discuss with Victor entering the league. What have you, before we get on to the on-the-court stuff, I'm just fascinated with his journey from France to just the States itself and what you observed and heard in terms of him just adjusting to like American culture and just kind of just the grind of an NBA season. What have you observed about him so far?
Well, as far as the American culture, there is still the kind of the vernacular, the slang stuff that he's getting used to right now. There are oftentimes during press conferences, he will ask you to repeat things and explain words. So, for example, this one I found a little surprising. Second unit, he didn't know what that meant. Somebody asked him during the media conference, they said, "Oh, what do you think about Keldon Johnson in that second unit?" And he would stop, he'd look at you, go like, "Second unit, what does that mean?" One of the more funnier moments was actually one night post-game in the locker room. Myself and other writers were there, and the only player they made available for the post-game was Jeremy Sohan. So we were waiting for him in the locker room, and Wemby was in there. So, can't talk to him as much. He already did his main conference, so he's done for the night. So all of us are hanging out, talking, and remember, he's a teenager. Well, at that time, he was a teenager. He's now 20 years old. So at the time, he's a teenager, and he's getting dressed, and all he's doing is just looking at us and kind of like eavesdropping. This is what he is, eavesdropping. So like a kid, he's like, "What are you guys talking about?" So he actually came out and hung out with us for a while, just to chat. And he was still trying to learn the English language. So he came to admit that one of the phrases he never learned before, knew before, until coming to the United States was the concept of laying low. Like just lay low, calm down, lay low. He said that was one that he never heard of before until he came to the United States. So that gives you a little glimpse at how he is once the uniform is off, the microphones are down. He'll just chat with you and everything. Also, too, his parents were waiting for him at the time outside the locker room. So you got to remember, he's still a kid. They literally came to pick him up from work. That's basically what they did. So he still he doesn't drive yet in San Antonio. So he's still adjusted to the American culture. And that's still a thing. But I mean, he's having fun, once the uniform's off and the microphones are down and not being interviewed, he's just still trying to learn what it is to be in a new country. As far as on the court, I mean, my goodness, he's on a tear right now. Have you seen what he's been doing lately? 20 or more points in about 5 games straight on minutes restriction. He's on a minutes. He's doing all that on a minutes restriction. So, Spurs fans are more than thrilled about what he's doing. It's just a shame that the Spurs collectively are just not a good team. As of this recording, 5 games up in the win column. That's it. I gotta be honest with you. I'm a little surprised by this record. I did not see this coming. I think all of San Antonio didn't see this coming.
We did, yeah,
same thing. At all. Because on paper, it makes sense, right? You bring in the crew from last year. They got, curb stomped, so they don't want to go through that again. There's some cohesion there, you would think, between Trey and Keldon and Devin and Zach Collins. All you're doing is just really inserting a number 1 pick, and that's it. And then they're just coming up short. There's so many reasons why that's possibly happening, whether that's the Sohan experiment at PG point guard, that threw a wrench. Spurs been dealing with the injury bug of late. Devin Vassell was out for a while. Obviously, Wembanyama's been on a minutes restriction. Could that be the reason why, lineups have been changing left and right? Now, Keldon Johnson's off the bench when he is the highest paid 6th man on the Spurs roster right now. So, and the youth is still an issue. It's still an issue. You're seeing these kids still make some ill-advised decisions on the court, taking bad shots. The number one thing that's baffled me so far, outside of the record, is on the court is why it took until a little over 30 games for the guys to realize they have a 7'5" guy on their roster. You just feed him. I'm not kidding. I am not kidding.
Yeah.
Go back and look at some of those early games from the San Antonio Spurs this season, and you could see Blake Wesley passing up Wemby, Keldon Johnson passing up Wemby, Sohan passing up Wemby, and you're like, guys, he's right there. So there's just been a lot of missteps, and that's been leading to their what you're seeing right now record wise. There's a part of me, and I don't want to fall into the trap of thinking they've turned the corner, because they have lost the last 2 games, but they're not getting busted in the mouth and and laying on the ground to die. Basically, they're fighting back. Everybody saw that Milwaukee game in San Antonio. That was probably the best game so far I've been to in San Antonio. I mean, that game was electric from beginning to end. Usually I leave about 4 minutes before the end of the fourth so I can get ready to the meeting room and do what I got to do. I waited till about 30 seconds. That's how great it was. I was like, hey, I can run, I can dash there in 30 seconds. I know I can. That's how I was. And but you're seeing them, starting maybe to get it a little bit. And I don't want to jump the gun yet, because I fell for this trap earlier in the season when it went out to Phoenix and beat Phoenix twice in a row in their gym. My thought was, oh my God, they turned the corner already. We're way ahead of schedule. And then 18 games losing streak. So I'm a little cautious right now. I want to see how they play again. I don't know when you're releasing this, but how they play against Detroit. They better not lose that game to Detroit. How they play against Chicago and then Charlotte and Boston. This has been the easiest stretch of games the Spurs have. On paper, they should be getting some wins soon. The only hiccup is that Boston game. So we'll see how they look. But if we're looking at signs of progress, so far so good in recent games. They're not getting destroyed. They're winning the third quarter. They're not falling back on their heels. They're fighting back to rally. So progress. At this point of the season, guys, the bar is low. I'll take anything right now to put a smile on my face covering this team.
So I want to ask with Victor, I'm sure he's been used to international play and just winning. So there's just the polar opposite of that. What has that taken a toll on him?
Oh, yes.
Or is he just been patient, or what? How has he been feeling regarding that?
He is being patient, but as far as a toll of the losses mounting up, there are times where it's visible. I guess the biggest example right now is somebody on social media I don't know if you guys saw this, but if y'all did it, this is also for your viewers. Somebody on social media was at the Spurs Cavs game, and as Victor was exiting out the tunnel, he screamed at the top of his lungs the F word. So they're starting to mount up. It's starting to get to him. Everybody heard about him self-checking in. At this point, he self-checks himself in. And by the way, Popovich said that he's glad he did that, but Devin Vassell said he would never dare do that on a Popovich-led team. But you're starting to see a little frustration. He did openly admit that the minutes restriction is bothering him. He did openly admit that him not winning the NBA Rookie of the Month twice now is motivating him. And he put out a warning to everybody saying once the minutes restriction is lifted, it's game on. So we'll see. We'll see if it's going to be game on. At this point of the season, guys, the Spurs season is pretty much done. It's cooked. And they ain't going to make the play-in tournament. It's done. So you just want to see growth from Wemby, from the peripheral players. And we talked about this on Locked On Spurs a couple weeks back, was if phase 1 of the rebuild was winning the lottery and getting yourself Wemby, okay, check that off the box. The Spurs could possibly be in phase 2 of the rebuild, and that being, all right, guys, if your name's not Wemby, you guys are auditioning for the season moving forward, and then next season and the years coming up. So who fits best with him? And there's a positive argument to that of where they are on the rebuild is, okay, let's look at the current roster. Who can we stick around with this guy building forward? So, yeah, it's definitely different than what it was covering the Big Three era, a little bit of the Kawhi era. A lot of these Spurs fans, this generation of Spurs fans grew up with decades of excellence, and you're seeing them now go through their first rebuild, and they're not used to it. So, so Spurs fans are visibly upset about what's going on.
I think in some ways, though, good signs there that it does bother Wemby so much. Just obviously, you don't want things to to tip so far in that direction that it sours him on the franchise as a whole. Of course, you brought up Coach Popovich, and I think that's kind of one of the factors of all of this that kind of sort of adds salt to the wound. Is that you have arguably the greatest coach the three of us have ever watched coach. He's certainly at least in that argument. What is happening there, and how much? I mean, you have this legendary coach, but these records, how much patience is there for Popovich? In looking at a 5-30 record at the time of recording this is unexpected, as you just went through so eloquently for us. What are fans kind of thinking about all this? I mean, you have also some highlight moments of Coach Pop, chastising the crowd for booing at Kawhi Leonard several weeks ago. Several instances there. How are things with that?
Yeah, it's not good. A lot of Spurs fans are already asking that it's time for him to step aside. If you look at recent Spurs seasons, technically he's not been into postseason 5 years straight. If you go from the last postseason performance, so take away that season, from that moving on to this season, he has a well below 500 record. So there was a lot of Spurs fans that kind of see this kind of like what the Dallas Cowboys went through of letting go Tom Landry during the early early 80s, late 70s, and bringing in Jimmy Johnson, new blood. They kind of draw a parallel to that. And needless to say, Spurs fans do have pitchforks out and fires and everything. Like, he needs to go. I mean, that's the state of the Spurs fan base when it comes to Coach Pop. Many just feel that his time has come and gone, that they want to see new blood in there. And the add fuel to the fire is the fact that the Spurs had good head coaching potential on their staff, from Will Hardy to Ime Udoka to Monty Williams to Becky Hammond to many others. And just to see those names slip out because Pop feels he can still keep on going. So that's just adding more to the Spurs fan base frustration. Was like, we had these guys, we had these people here. There would have been a smooth transition, but here we are. To me, I think that is going to be one of the biggest pieces of this current rebuild, is who steps in after Pop exits. Because I don't see the Spurs getting out of their technically a rebuild for another maybe 2 years. I think maybe 2 years. I think they're going to be the path of the Orlando Magic. They win the number one pick, Banchero, and then they start building around that. Oh, they get Mo Wagner, great. Then they start building pieces around that. Very similar to OKC. So I think that's going to be a really big assignment for the team, is who steps in for Pop once he's done, because he can't be coaching Wemby for Wemby's entire career. That ain't going to happen. True. So that, to me, is going to be a very interesting question and bridged across once the team gets there.
With that being said, we have the trade deadline approaching, and I'm sure you're covering this a lot on your show and thinking about this a lot. Do you expect the Spurs to have any potential to be active during the trade deadline? And yes, if so, what are they looking at?
I think there is potential, but will the Spurs act on it? I don't know. And here's why I say I don't know, because, I'll break that up. I say potential. So they have the potential to do it because of the war chest of picks they got. And yes, flippable players that are not named Wemby. And also a lot of cash on hand. They have one of the highest, one of the most amount of financial cap space in the league. So the potential is them to make a big move. But the point is, are they going to do it just to do it? And because they got to? I actually anticipate them to be active in the off season. I think there you'll see the Spurs do it, because why make a major move now? What are you going to play for at this point? The season is done. Right now, Spurs fans are just trying to get through the 82 games and, call it a day. That's where they're at right now. I'm there too. It's funny you bring this up, Matt, because I tell people that know that I cover the Spurs, They'll say, "Oh my God, look, they're in it. They're in the first quarter. They're in the first quarter. Oh, look, they're winning at halftime." I'm like, just give it time. Just give it time. The real game starts after halftime. Then we'll see. If they got the goods to make a run. And it's not that I'm jaded, but it's been rinse and repeat now. I mean, it's rinse and repeat. There's some times, guys, I go to the conference rooms post games. I'm like, I don't know what to ask. I don't know what to ask anymore because it's just rinse repeat. It's competitive first half, destruction in the second half. Competitive first half, stupid mistakes down the road. It's competitive first half, and they get clobbered in the third quarter, game over. So, there's only some. I mean, it's gotten to a point where Pop just comes in now and just says a blanket statement. He'll literally say, because I know what you guys are going to ask, so I'll answer it right now. So-and-so played well. We're getting better, incremental growth, and he'll leave. It's just kind of rinse and repeat. Now, I pigeonhole that because of the last two games. There's seemingly something there now. Maybe they didn't turn the curve. Maybe they just, took their first step in the right direction. So we'll see. But circling back to your Popovich question is, no, I think, he's going to be 70, is he going to be 76, 77 in just a few weeks?
Wow.
I believe, I don't know if some of you guys have that information. Sorry about that. But
yeah, I can look it up.
Yeah, thank you. So there's something's got to give, and look, it's going to be bittersweet the day he says adios. I'm calling it a day.
75 at the end.
75. Thank you.
75.
Yeah. So, but it needs to be done. In my opinion, I wish they would have done it sooner than later, especially after, where the direction they're going for the rebuild. But
yeah, it makes sense.
I don't think anybody in that franchise is going to tell them bye-bye. I don't think ownership is going to say, you got to go.
Yeah, understandable. And I wonder if the Spurs look at, because what you described with how the games are going for the Spurs reminds me of the last two seasons for cross-state rivals, the Houston Rockets. Very much the case, like fourth quarter turnovers would always kind of end them. Do you think they're looking at the veterans that the Rockets brought in, and is that something that you're thinking when you mention off-season moves for the Spurs?
I think if we want to triage it, I think number one's got to be a point guard. No knock on Trey Jones. I think I'm a big fan of Trey Jones. I love his game. Very good guy to talk to. During New Year's Eve game, he and I walked out of the the Frost Center talking about fireworks and his kid. So he's a very nice guy, and he's a very good point guard. But I still think they need to get a better point guard. I think that's goal number one in the offseason. Goal number two is adding veterans. And what's frustrating is the Spurs did have a couple of veterans that I think could have made a difference on this roster. They had Reggie Bullock, and they had Campaign. Now, Campaign pretty much didn't, he all but said he didn't want to be in San Antonio after that trade went down. So I think they may have behind closed doors said, okay, bye, wave you. But, I think a guy like a Reggie Bullock could have brought some little bit of a grit to this team, a little bit more, just toughness to this team. I think they do need it. So I think getting veteran presence is going to be a big wish list. And then number three is preparing for the draft. I mean, here we go again. The Spurs could be battling for the number one pick all over again. Now, it's not a sexy draft coming up. There's no big names, a lot of good players, but no open eyes wide, and you got to get this guy player. So they're going to be looking at that. But I really believe this roster is going to look very different next year.
Jeff, thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate the time. Can you let our audience know where they can find you on social media, your podcast, and anything else you're working on as well?
Yeah, I'm the Kens 5 San Antonio Spurs beat writer, so I pretty much, just all day Spurs for them. It's a local TV station out in San Antonio. And also, as you mentioned, the host of the Locked on Spurs podcast. Every day, just new topics to discuss. We recently talked about, the Spurs, another losing streak, and trying to predict when it'll end, better end against Detroit, Spurs. Better end against Detroit.
Right.
So we're talking about that, and we're actually gonna have a fun show. Well, again, I think for tomorrow or tonight, whenever this airs, but we're gonna have an AP writer for the Spurs. Well, not for the Spurs, but for the San Antonio. Excuse me, coming on. He's old enough to be at the Spurs' very first home game in San Antonio back in 1978. Wow. So he's going to come on and talk about what it was like, the atmosphere. So look forward to that. Subscribe on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, pretty much pick a platform. We're there, Locked On Spurs.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Jeff. Really appreciate it.
Yes, sir.